All right, let's get started. All right, so thank you everyone for coming today. I know that like the maybe the end of the summer break for some of us can be a bit of a hectic time, so we appreciate everyone's attendance. So, Kelsey is currently at Oregon State, and some of you might remember her as being on the panel in the previous working group meeting at the previous room conference. So excited to see what she's got for us today. So, take it away.
Great, thanks for the introduction. Um, yeah, so knowing that this space is about graduate mathematics education and knowing that my work is primarily in preparing math graduate teaching assistants for um, teaching, their professional development and teaching, that's really the space that I'm going to be in today. Those are the things I'm going to be talking about is primarily that growth. Um, or that aspect, that dimension of being a graduate student, their teaching. Um, and what I really want to focus on is just some of the ideas that I've been percolating with, and some of the yes, just some of the main things that I've been thinking about as I've been thinking about GTA growth. Yes, so there we go. Growth is something that I've really been thinking about, right? So not just what are the practices that they have or what are the beliefs or conceptualizations that they have, but I'm really interested in seeing the change and sort of that holistic understanding that a person different people come in with different ideas, practices, beliefs, and how does that change? How does that shift? And in particular, the professional development that I run with GTAs is really, really focused on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so I want to see it not just, sort of in general, like teaching practices. But if I take an equity focus, and there's lots of different ways one can do that, do I see growth as an equitable instructor? What does that mean? What does that look like? And so really just keep a very open mind here as I just am going to kind of play around a little bit with here are some theories and here are some ways that I think are helpful to illustrate that growth that are honestly a little non-traditional um, and alternative, but I think that they do a good job of maybe capturing a little bit more of this like holistic sort of adventure that they're going on. Um, and we'll have some playtime at the end, so it'll be good. Um, okay. Okay, so first, just a very brief intro to why we're focusing on equitable instruction. Um, these are things that I think you're all very familiar with as you've been in room and you've gone to different talks there. But we know that historically excluded learners are routinely given least access to advanced math content, least access to well-prepared math teachers. We also know about some facts about active learning. Students in classes with traditional lecturing are 1.5 times more likely um, to fail than students in classes with active learning. And then specifically, if we're thinking about that equity piece, so maybe thinking about how these things are changing for historically excluded learners, we have some examples like Theobald et al. That found a shrink in difference on exam scores between minoritized and non-minoritized students in active learning compared to traditional lecture. One of the big things that um, I think it was Estrella Johnson who gave the talk at Room this previous go round and talked about sort of like the dangers, right, of doing active learning without having that intentional equity focus. Um, and so that's really That's really what we're trying to do, is focus on active learning, but with the equitable focus. Right, so, need to focus on a careful implementation to mitigate those inequities, and so we wanna see not this picture on the left. We don't wanna see that, but we do wanna see this picture on the right, and we do wanna see, each of our students being engaged in mathematics, each of our students doing the writing, doing the explaining, taking turns listening, that kind of thing. And then why GTAs? So GTAs constitute a very significant portion of undergraduate mathematics teaching and future teaching. They teach thousands of undergraduate students, maybe tens of thousands of undergraduate students each year. More math departments are supporting GTAs through some kind of professional development. Braley, Bookman, and colleagues have really been looking into like surveys of professional development across the nation. We know that more math departments are doing some kind of professional development that's increasing over time. We also know that they've been looking at some of the different components of what's going on in PD, and there's been more attention to ideas of DEI in PD. We don't know exactly what those are or how different those are in different institutions, but we do know that there is more of a focus. Um, and then also, we do know that teaching experiences are supportive of graduate students in their research skills in STEM and do prepare them for a research career. So, one of the concerns that folks might have about focusing so much on teaching is, well, are we actually supporting them in finishing getting their PhD and finishing like the program that they're in? And the answer to that is a very resounding yes, that for those who are engaged in teaching experiences, we can at least say that that is helping them complete their program of study. So, how are we going to capture their growth in teaching? Gosh, I love I just feel that, all these different theories that are out there are really just different pairs of glasses that we could be wearing for a situation. And one of the pairs of glasses that I've been putting on for some of the data we have is the theory of planned behavior. And so this is one way to basically say, if we have this particular behavior going on, what are some of the things that seem to really be informing that behavior and growing that behavior? And so to kind of outline what each of those components are, some of the aspects that they're looking at is attitude towards a behavior. So if you feel, I mean, just broadly sweeping, like if you feel positive about doing that kind of behavior versus negative about doing that kind of behavior, behavior could be something like group work, for example, having your students working in groups. If you have different sort of attitudes about that, that informs your enactment of that behavior. Subjective norms are social pressures. So if you feel like kind of like everybody is doing it is one kind of subjective norm versus no one is doing it, I feel isolated, or there's some kind of right, maybe you're working with other colleagues who are also teaching the same course. What are they doing? How did they think about it? Um, Perceived behavioral control being how well you think that you can actually execute that behavior. So, how well do you actually think you can get students to work in groups? I do see that a lot with the TAs that I work with, where when I first see them, there's a lot of this language about forcing students to work in groups and feeling kind of uncomfortable with asking students to do anything that they don't necessarily want to do. So that's something that can shift over time. And then intention. So basically, how are they planning to use certain teaching practices? Or are they kind of, having some kind of schema in their brain that they're like, okay, I'm gonna maybe do this XYZ thing. in the classroom, or maybe they're really just kind of on the fly, off the cuff doing things. But what kind of intentions are they bringing into the space? And so I'll give an example of one of the ways that we came to understand at least one teacher's growth using this particular theory. Um, so a little bit of context for our program, if we just kind of look at this top row here, our program consists of 3 components. There's a graduate teaching seminar. Just very briefly, that's your basic, like, um, you know, like very basic kind of teaching practices, some ideas related to thinking about engaging each of your learners, facilitating group work kind of basics, how are we communicating information on the board kind of basics. Um, and then we have, so that's their first year. And then in the second year, we have 2 courses. There's an intro to equity and active learning. That's where they're kind of just expanding their toolbox. Here's a bunch of different strategies. Here are some, uh, you know, practices to kind of mitigate like implicit bias. Think about like privilege that you had as a learner, privilege your students might have, or not. And then the advanced course is thinking more about like um, different aspects of equity. We really break down like Gutierrez's 4 dimensions, and then continue having those conversations related to active learning. And so for this student, Ayla, one of the things that I'm doing when I'm trying to look at growth is I'm really looking at first just a variety of data. So you'll notice in parentheses next to some of these quotes like RJ1, ET, D. So RJ is like a reflection journal that Ayla wrote. ET is an exit ticket with a quote. Um, let's see. I'm actually trying to remember what D means. I know O is observation, I is interview. Gosh, what is D? That might be a debrief interview, I think, actually. So we collect a lot of data. They're writing reflection journals in the course, filling out some exit tickets about how it went. We do observations, we see what they're doing in the classroom, we interview them about their ideas, and we have debrief interviews after observations to get more of that insight into their thinking while they're teaching. Um, and so a lot of a lot of my analysis is spreadsheets. God, do I love spreadsheets. And so I'm taking all of these different data sources as my rows. I'm thinking about these different aspects as my columns, these different components like attitude, subjective norm, perceived behavior control. Like, what am I seeing? And then really trying to like cobble these pieces together to say, ooh, can I see like a picture here? One of the first things that I'm doing is I'm asking myself, well, what is the behavior that I care about looking at? Because there's lots of different behaviors I could look at. I focused on supporting group work because she talked a lot about supporting group work. I mean, what's interesting is we can see here that at the beginning, we're not promoting group work. In the fall, we're asking students to check each other's answers. And in the winter and the spring, she's co-constructing and revisiting group work norms. And so she talks about these are the norms. Are there any norms that you as students want to add? So she's really like focusing more on how she's setting up group work and inviting students to do group work. We see that a lot of this change when we look at all across data sources is that she has this constant intention. That's something that really stayed with her the whole time, which is that she wants students to collaborate and talk with each other. I do see that for this particular GTA, that was sort of like the big thread that was sort of like inspiring her to do some of this change. And we can also see the ways that attitude, subjective norm, and perceived behavioral control changed over time as well. So in the fall, there was this impetus, okay, I'm gonna try to get them to work into groups. And then we see this boost in confidence. So there's this going from almost no group work to really great and productive group work. Um, and we also see the shift in, well, I think students are going to be resistant to group work. I've already set a norm these terms. So if I try to change things, are students going to be like, no, I don't want to do something different? And then in the winter and spring, we see this ease with group work. And the attitude changes as well. So forcing students to work in groups felt uncomfortable. She felt more empowered. And just as a really good note here about this too, is that something I also see with the TAs is, um, not everything is linear. It's like, we really would love for change and growth to just be like, oh yeah, they're like always getting better, 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 better. But I think if we think about our own experiences with teaching, at least for me anyways, there's like growth and improvement, but then sometimes, things get stressful, or, you try out this one thing this one day, but maybe you like take a back seat the next day or something like that, right? So there's a little bit of this like sort of ebb and flow and sort of maybe like spiraling growth, where it's like over time it does generally trend to improve, but you're not always going to see some of those really cool things in every observation. Um, so this is one way to sort of illustrate thinking over time how things are shifting. Um, One of the things I want to also think about, right, is so this focus was a little bit more about the teaching practice of group work. And so taking an equitable lens, there's this question of, well, how are we going to do that? How are we going to focus on equity within this? And so one of the things that we can do is, at least I've enjoyed doing in the past, is thinking about Gutierrez's 4 frames of equitable mathematics instruction. So thinking about those critical and dominant axes. So where do we see in interviews or observations, and maybe still thinking about theory of planned behavior, do we see power, achievement, identity, access? And this is something that I have captured before with a an article that is soon to be coming out, with teacher leaders' responses to equity. It'll be coming out in the Team Journal. I'm very excited about that. And actually, one of the big pieces that I wanted to also focus on today is, um, so not just thinking about sort of the spreadsheet illustration, but what are other ways to show, um, right, this equitable growth or equitable thinking. So here's an example of equitable thinking where I've done some poetic transcription. And I'll talk just a little bit about some of the like why poetry and why artistic expressions, but just bear with me for a moment to think about the fact that we're using poetry to sort of showcase responses to equity. And so what that basically means is, with our interview transcripts with teacher leaders, we've taken their verbatim quotes and we have, in essence, organized their own quotes into a poem that captures some of the ideas that they're trying to express. And when we were crafting this one, we were thinking about those different dimensions of equity, and we chose different teacher leaders who were focused on not just the dominant axis, but also the critical one. And so this is just half of a poem that we snapshotted together. And I'll read this out loud because I think reading the poem offers some of the effects that poetry can have as a powerful tool. So you'll notice there's teacher leaders versus district leaders, and one of the choices that we made when we made this poem was to say, let's take teacher leaders and district leaders and like let's have them be in dialogue with each other. And part of the reason we did that is because we wanted to show how teacher leaders and district leaders can sort of be in communication with each other in making positive change for equity. So without further ado, teacher leader Tegan, at a very young age, we track. We create the haves and the have-nots. It's just horrible. Why do we even need that? District leader Dune, there are assumptions students have gaps. I was having a conversation with a teacher. Well, those are my low students. These kids can't do that. I just ripped the Band-Aid off. I said, do your kids know that you define them that way? How does that make them feel? District Leader Dawn, I need to be willing to push on people. Stop trying to go around to make changes towards more equity. Just be very direct. No, this is why we're doing this, so stop doing that. District Leader Dune, we're still feeling like it's not safe to push. We've worked for years to stamp out tracking, to stamp out ability grouping. We've regressed. I guess we never really left it. Teacher Leader Tegan, I want students to learn mathematics through the lens of social justice. Expose students to something they don't know exists, looking at mortgage denial rates based on race, empower them to act. But in a district, you have to make sure everyone is okay with what you do. Go through proper channels, include all stakeholders in district level decisions. Reading in the news of teachers getting fired for including social justice in their class. I have wanted to take more action steps for equity, but haven't. And there's more to that poem. But I'm going to take a pause here and I'm going to ask for each of you to engage in a waterfall. I think it's called a waterfall chat. So take a moment to think for yourself, type in chat, but don't hit enter. Don't hit enter yet. Type in chat. What are some things that you notice in this poem? It could be things related to equity, emotions. I'm going to leave that really open-ended. Okay, so just what are some things you notice in the poem? Go ahead and type what you're thinking in chat, but don't hit enter, and then I will give you the 3, 2, 1 to hit enter, and we'll just see what everybody's been thinking. Okay, can I get a thumbs up either through your video or through emoji or whatever thing that exists when you are ready? Okay, if you're still thinking, that's all right. You can post some of what you're thinking. 3, 2, 1, hit enter. Hmm. Yes. Yes to all of these. So we can see how teachers and district leaders are noticing the lack of equity, the need to advertise and educate. Yeah, communication is huge. The interactions they're having with other teachers, interleaving of multiple perspectives. Yeah, there's different ways to show emphasis: uppercase, bold, italicized, indented, um, ending statements of each stanza feels powerful. Lots of tensions. Yes, that is something huge that's comes out when thinking about equity and equitable instruction. There's a lot of inherent tensions in the work, including honesty and frustration. And yeah, absolutely. Fascism definitely works when left undeterred, and that's why we need responses to equity. Um, thank thank you all for sharing the things that you noticed in there. Um, and so now I'll just kind of take a moment to say, yeah, so why the poetic artistic approach? And if you're just like, wow, this poem came out of nowhere, that's because it kind of did. I just kind of threw it in there for you all to look at. And I'm not really gonna go into a whole lot of detail about, citations. I could talk about Patricia Levy, and artistic methods and Prendergast. I'm happy to talk about those at the end or send you resources if you would like them. But I'm really gonna stay out of the weeds of talking about all those different aspects, but just kind of hope that you'll engage in this sort of like open-minded investigation. Um, yeah, because I think a lot of people are very comfortable with sort of like coding things and putting it in a spreadsheet, and then like you throw a poem at them and they're like, what? Like, okay, yeah, we can do that, but also very excited. Um, so capturing complex ideas, right? Each of you kind of pointed out different things, right? Those multiple interpretations is a benefit, not a drawback. Um, Also, the artistic activities, like open-ended nature of artistic activity. So if we ask people to create images is another piece of work that I'm also engaged in. That creates rich opportunities for sincere, genuine expressions. I've asked some of my GTAs to also create art themselves in their reflection journals. And what's really interesting is I've seen some of them do things like tell these incredible stories, so there's this narrative way of showing like some growth. Some of them have also written their own poetry. I've gotten stick poems before. Um, and those are very interesting. So a stick poem is when you look at the first letter of a line, and then you read like the first letter of each line going down, it like spells something out. So I didn't put an example in here, but I have had somebody consistently, like for each time I ask for a journal, do something like power. And then the choice of words that they make in making the stick poem really elucidates all of those conceptions that they have about what power means. Um, right, so there's these different kinds of expressions that can really highlight things like conceptualizations and behaviors. And it also like shows some of the emotions that are really important to learning. Um, and the images and metaphors that maybe stick in your mind from art are really powerful. So again, I mentioned some aspects of like visualizing equity is some other work that I do where I've asked people like show me a picture of what you think equity looks like, or show me a picture of what critical transformations looks like. And I've asked for that over time. Um, and one of the things that always comes up is the fence. And I don't have a picture of this for you now, but you all know what I'm talking about. It's the fence. And so that's something that sticks in people's minds. It's like, this is what this means to be doing this work. Um, so there's a lot of power in doing that. And so now the sort of last bit I have for you is kind of like this merging of, okay, so I talked a little bit about theory of planned behavior. I talked a little bit about four dimensions. Here's something I'm currently working on. So this is not something that's coming out in any kind of um, manuscript right now. Like, I'm showing you something that is that, like, this is in progress. I feel like so many times in talks, people are like, oh, here, I'm done. Like, here's this nice thing. No, we're actually gonna take a look at something that's like, oh, what am I currently working on? What am I currently thinking about? So this is a GTA who I looked at two interviews. So the first one is in December, like the beginning of a fall term, and then the last one is in May, in 2024. And for the interview, one of the questions we ask is, what things went well this term in terms of equity and inclusivity in teaching or in interactions with students since your last interview? And so what I am currently playing with is, can I use poetic transcription to show how they are growing in equitable instruction between these two time periods? So again, I'm going to read this poem that is I'm currently tinkering with, really, for December and for May. And yeah, I'd just love to see if there's things that you notice in terms of, like, where do you see theory of planned behavior? Where do you see equity? So I'm going to go ahead and read these poems in progress as well. Okay, so I kind of became more aware. I never called on them. I never learned their names. Let's do some equitable teaching. I learned all of their names. They don't love to participate in conversation because they're very to themselves. Instead of forcing some of them into groups, I'll go work with them one on one, individually. I'm trying to meet them where their needs are. Maybe they get more anxious in group settings. I hope I could get them to really want to be in a group. I don't know if that's just a student to student thing or if there's something that I can do to make them feel more welcome and fostered environment. I really love getting to know my students. I make really good connections with my students, and they feel very comfortable with me. I've come up to talk to them, kind of just being able to read them. I know sometimes they don't feel super comfortable talking, even just one-on-one with me. A couple of my students were struggling with the quizzes. Write notes on their quizzes. Feel free to come to office hours. And one of my students did. I was so happy. They were like asking more questions. They started becoming a regular at office hours. They would never talk in class. They wouldn't work too well in the group work, but this one-on-one environment, that really helped this particular student. Being a very calming presence, relatable to the students. I think that's one of my strengths. That's grown more at the beginning of the year. I was kind of like very push and pull, keep them at a distance. You're not their friend, but also let them be comfortable with you. Okay, these are kind of my strengths. Let me like use these and utilize them more. Okay, same activity. What are some things that you notice from this poem in progress? Um, don't type enter into chat just yet, but go ahead and type some thoughts that you're having, and I'll let you know when to hit enter. And same as before, give me a thumbs up when you're done. I'm gonna give you like 30 more seconds or so. All right, 3, 2, 1, smash. Yes. Oh my goodness. Yes, inviting joy, and it seems like this instructor cares. Oh my gosh, I just have to comment on that because I've had conversations with her and like, oh my God, you just see some people that just beam and like she is just a ray of sunshine. And I'm like so happy that she's teaching students. Because she's just like, "Oh, yeah, I think about these things, I do these things." And, like, I've been to her class in person, and, oh my god, she has students I've actually seen she has students now. This is actually way after 24. This was this last spring. So spring 25. She's got students up on the boards. All the students are up on the boards doing all their math together in small groups, and she is going to like all these different groups, and there's like student presentations going on. Like, oh, it's just excellent. Um, yeah, group work only works when students feel like they can be part of groups in the class. Yeah, she's got a flexible mindset about what group work or individual work might look like. Yeah, the structure of the 2 poems, oh, yeah. It needs it needs a little bit of love. Also, I'm trying to, like, put it on a slide, so it's, like, a little bit of cut and pasty here. Yeah, being aware of own strengths. Yeah, these are super great observations. And actually, I'm working on another poem for another TA who very clearly in 3 different debrief interviews talked about, I have, the girls in my class, the women in my class, like, they're kinda like, I'm not really sure that they're, like, feeling like they can participate and stuff. Second, debrief interview, she's talking about how she's, like, really trying to intentionally, like, support and empower women. Third debrief interview, she doesn't bring it up, but I ask her, I say, "Hey, you talked about empowering women. How's that, was that something on your mind at all?" And she's like, "Oh, yeah, I've got this down." Like, I feel like that was a problem at first, but now I feel like it's not as much a problem. And what's really cool is that I saw an observation, in the video recording, there's like the people in the front who are like, here's my hand, here's my hand, here's my hand. And she had already called on a woman in the back to respond to a question. And she says, well, I don't really know if this is right. So the hands are going up. She goes like this, put to like indicate to them, like, hold on, like, hold on with your questions. I'm gonna like keep asking you. It's like, oh, but you could be right, is what she says. And then the that those students start articulating like, oh, this is like here are some of my thoughts about this, and then there's like continued dialogue and conversation. So just really making it clear that it's like, oh, you don't have to just not participate because you're not sure, and we're not just going to call on you know uh not women the whole time. Okay, so let's see what time we have for playing. Okay, so we have 10 minutes. One of the things I was imagining was you could grab a transcript and do your own kind of playtime. I'm not sure that 10 minutes is like the most amount of time. You could maybe do something if you have a transcript, 5 minutes. If you have some art that you've also been working on, could share that too. I guess I'll just ask because this is a small group. How are we feeling? Do we kind of want to play with what we have, or do we want to have a chat? Okay, option one, you can give me fingers. Option one is, yes, I want to play with some of my own data. Option two is, let's chat some more about art. Or you can put one or two in the chat. You can put numbers in the chat. Can you give me fingers? Two? That's the chatting. We love chatting. Great. Um, yeah, so that's what I guess I'll just start open-ended. That's what I have for you. What are some thoughts that you're wondering about? Thoughts, questions, ideas, things you want to show off?
I just want to start by saying that I really appreciate the arts-based vibes. I also do arts-based research, and it's not super common in math ed spaces. So it was nice to see that in your abstract. The question that I have for you, because it's something that I've been thinking about in my work where I've used arts-based approaches to make sense of data and interactions with participants, but also to have participants make sense of things in kind of a participatory way. I've been thinking a lot about the power of using arts-based approaches, specifically in math contexts with math people, with math stakeholders. And specifically, since we're in a seminar focused on graduate students, I'm curious what your thoughts or experiences have been around the unique benefits or challenges that you've noticed in relation to using arts-based approaches with specifically these groups. If there's anything that you can think of in relation to that, because that's I've been enjoying the complexities of teasing out myself.
Oh my gosh, yes, Brady. I have so many thoughts about that. And the first example that comes to mind is just, oh my God. Okay, so um with another research group that I work with, Act Up Math, it's about critical transformations in mathematics departments. And so there are these networked improvement communities at 3 different institutions. It's comprised of faculty, students, undergraduate students. I think some of them had some graduate students. And one of the questions we asked them in a journal was, right, like give me a picture, give me an image of what it looks like what does equity look like, I think, or what does inclusive teaching look like? It was something like that. And one of the responses that we got was, I'm too obtuse for this, just in words. And I was like, okay. This feels like, I don't know, like we asked them to do something that they're just like, oh no, I'm like not comfortable with, or is it just like just so much resistance, right? It's like, hey, making art is a part of a human experience, just like making math is a part of a human experience. How come you're too obtuse for this? So that was one very interesting piece. Right, I don't have to do art projects anymore. But it turns out that, so here's one way I think you can really connect art to math. Like, raise your hand if one of the reasons you like math is because you think it's beautiful and pretty. Tim is shaking his head. All right, I see some hands. I see some hands. Maybe we can argue about this. But a lot, so this is absolutely backed by anecdotal experience, not research, but maybe there's someone who's done research at this. A lot of mathematicians think that it's beautiful. And actually, one of the reasons I even thought about doing math was because in pre-calculus, we talked about fractals and we were doing art. We were talking about how do you make this fractal with different, like, constructions of functions? How do you graph Snoopy lying on his doghouse in your TI-84 or whatever calculator I had. So anyways, I'm totally digressing. That is to say, I have seen some people say that. When we asked them to do it a second time, though, we did not get responses like that. And I think there are a number of people who said, okay, you know what? This felt really weird to me when I first did it, but now I'm like leaning into it and like here's like an image. I will also say that it was an absolute mistake to say that they could use an image from the internet. Don't do that. Um, that was a mistake because some of them I think they just were like, oh, okay, this like looks good. But the people who like drew pictures or like constructed something themselves, I could tell there was a lot more like personalization and stuff that I could get out of it compared to somebody who just grabbed it from the internet. AI generated, that's okay. I mean, that's its own hairball, but yeah, it was. So basically, I think just like with students in the classroom, if you're going to ask somebody to do something new and novel, you got to give them space. Long answer to your question.
Hi, Kelsey. Great talk. Thank you. I was a little late, so I missed first half of it, which I'll catch up on the recording. But the half of it I did catch was about still the poems, which are quite extraordinary, very cool. My question to you, I guess was how did you pick them? How did you decide what codes or like what lines perhaps from the transcript to pick? Um, did you code for them? Was it more of a artistic approach, seeing like different pieces come together, throughout the transcript? I just wanted to know.
Yeah, thanks for asking that question. I think for this most recent one, like I've had these frameworks in my mind, so I think even subconsciously, like I'm still kind of looking for some of those aspects. But I think I might have really free-formed it for this one poem. But I've definitely been thinking about theory of planned behavior for the empowering women one that I was mentioning, where it was like, oh, here's this very clear behavior of empowering women. Can I grab aspects that I see in theory of planned behavior by Brady? Can I grab like if I'm thinking about, well, equitable instruction, what does that mean? Sometimes it'll be like, okay, do I see an example of power? Do I see an example of identity? Do I see an example of like, critical versus dominant? So I think that's like, it can be fun to have the focus, but it can also be good to maybe not necessarily have too much of that. Because one of the things we were doing with the teacher leader poems is we grabbed like the four we were grabbing things that were kind of like, okay, here's like the different dimensions that we see, but we were also thinking about how context is just so important to understanding I mean like sort of equity ideas and concerns, but also just like to understand the poem better. And so we were like, okay, I actually think we should grab these pieces because they're so strong here. Like, right, they're talking about how it's like this historical context of like, well, yeah, all this assessments was made for white middle class folks. And it's like, that's not necessarily about, you know, teaching an equitable instruction, but that's like a context that was like really informing how they were thinking about things. So we put it in there.
Thank you.
And I think I've met everybody before at Room for sure. Mario, I'm not sure I've met you before. Where are you?
I was I recently graduated from Texas State University, and I am now at McNeese State University in Lake Charles, Louisiana. So that's where I am right now.
Beautiful. Assistant professor or
Yes.
lecturer? Oh,
So I'm like really nervous for this
congratulations.
coming semester.
Oh, is this your first
Yeah,
year? Oh my gosh,
a
congratulations.
brand new assistant professor.
Brand
Jesus
new,
Christ.
brand new.
Yes.
We love it. Oh my God,
Are
congrats.
you the first tenure track on the list?
What do you
who
mean?
was not? Are you the first of the cohort of RGME scholars to get a tenure track?
I didn't even know like if anybody was tenure or not. Like I just knew that like there were a lot of like grad student people. So I don't know about that. But maybe.
Congratulations.
Yeah. Thank you.
So it is where I am, it's 1:01, and so this is the brunt of our time today. Congrats to Mario for making an assistant professorship. And thank you most of all to Kelsey for this talk today. It was really great. So hopefully we will have this this session up online soon. So we will see all of you next time.
Great. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.